So you've decided to learn a language using comprehensible input. Now what? Although in my opinion, comprehensible input is the best and probably the only way to learn a language, you're really left to your own devices when you get started, and it's really up to you to create your own path. For that reason, I don't think it's very approachable for people who are just getting into language learning. It's true there's a ton of great testimonials online, and to people like us who have done the method, it just makes sense to us. But to the average person, I think it can feel pretty intimidating to hear someone say, go watch content in your target language that you understand, and 1,500 hours later, you'll be fluent. The average person is just more familiar with the traditional method, the way they were taught in school. A lot of people find comfort in the traditional way of learning, where it feels like they're being taught or guided, given a step-by-step process to learn something. But that doesn't exist in comprehensible input. In comprehensible input, there's not someone there telling you what exactly to do next. You're really absorbing the language. It's learning through absorption as opposed to instruction. And I think that can be disorienting for people who are very used to learning through traditional methods in school. And if we're being honest, the pitch of Duolingo or the pitch of these, online teachers who tell you that, you take their course and they'll teach you Spanish or French or German, it's much more attractive than what comprehensible input offers. Duolingo has you conquering levels one by one and is promising you that you're learning a piece of the puzzle each time you conquer a lesson. And the promise is as you progress and get more and more of those puzzle pieces together in your mind, you'll finish the course, and by that point, you'll be fluent in your target language. In an online course, it's very similar. You have the comfort of a teacher or a guide mapping out a very strict process for you to follow and giving you step-by-step instructions to basically master the language. You don't have to worry about what to watch, what to read, or whether what you're doing is correct, because the teacher will always be there to give you assistance and guide you, which again can feel very comforting to somebody who basically learned everything they know in their life through that method. It really feels like you're being taught the language and that progress is being handed to you, and you can rely on that to bring you to a mastery of the language step by step. And that is just the way most people have learned most things in their lives. Personally, I think if we go a layer deeper, we'll realize most things actually aren't learned this way, and traditional schooling isn't the best way of learning a lot of different subjects. But that's just people's experience, that's people's lived experience, that's how people feel about these methods. So there's a level of comfort there, and when they get into language learning, they're looking for something to grip onto like that. Which is why, although comprehensible input really works very well, it seems to be still pretty unknown to the mainstream public. And if we're being honest, comprehensible input really just can't function like a traditional subject. Because comprehensible input doesn't promise you a series of steps to learn a language. Comprehensible input says a language is pattern recognition, and your brain is good at recognizing patterns. Let your brain unconsciously recognize patterns as you actively listen to content you understand. It's not something that can be easily broken down into steps. No matter what we do in comprehensible input to try to make it more appetizing to the public, it's still always going to have that inherent flaw. It's going to have that inherent issue of not being like other subjects. I learned Spanish to a high level of fluency. So in Spanish, there's a channel called Español con Juan, and it's probably one of the most popular channels for people learning Spanish. And I remember one of his podcast episodes, he mentions the fact, he said, I'm gonna misquote him probably, but I'm gonna give you the basic idea of what he said. Basically said he would be able to tell which students were gonna be good or not so good at learning Spanish when they got to his class. The students who said, Juan, can you teach me Spanish, would be the students who didn't do well. And the students who said, Juan, can you help me learn Spanish? Those would be the students who did better, because those students understood that Spanish and a lot of things in life can't really be taught. They have to be learned. Someone has to actively be learning them. Like Spanish will not happen to you, it will happen through you. And obviously I'm saying Spanish, but plug in any target language that you want to learn. All that being said, I think if we want to get comprehensible input more mainstream, we have to fix some of these inherent problems, which I'm gonna go into. As I said before, I did comprehensible input to learn Spanish, so of course I was a Dreaming Spanish student. And Dreaming Spanish does a great job of kind of onboarding you into what feels a little bit more traditional, which is basically recommending you videos to watch every day, giving you a place to track your hours. But for now, that's only for Spanish. And secondly, I think they shine a lot more on the content side than the actual system side. There were things that I wanted to track and see as I learned Spanish that Dreaming Spanish didn't offer. I think as humans, we really desire external validation of our internal progress. With comprehensible input, a lot of the time, the progress that you see comes from just, can you understand this video a little bit better than you understood the last video? And that's kind of how we track progress in comprehensible input if we're not given external validation markers. I personally wanted to see my comprehension grow over time. I wanted to see kind of more statistics, charts, graphs, achievements, notifications, goals, streaks. I wanted more of that Duolingo experience that is really focused on showing you that you're progressing, as opposed to just letting you try to feel it for yourself. Because although I did feel it, comprehensible input takes a lot of time, and that feeling, is stretched out. You don't really feel it right away. You feel it over weeks, months, and years. These are things that I focused on heavily when developing my comprehensible input tracking platform, Lengualytics. Language learning through comprehensible input is subtle and kind of invisible. And if you don't have external measurements of that progress being shown to you on a daily basis, your progress can feel non-existent. As I said, humans, we want external validation. So what Lengualytics does is it tries to make your progress as visual as possible to you. It gives you that feeling of, yes, I'm moving forward, and also adds a social element where other people can see the content you're posting, so that you also get that social motivation as well that Duolingo gives you, which I also think is something that traditional learning does a lot better. It can feed into that competitive spirit. If you're a competitive person, you can compare with your friends, or if you're just somebody who likes support, it can be that supportive beam for you to lean on, seeing other people succeed, helping you succeed. So I think it works for multiple personalities of people. If you like watching numbers go up, you'll like the app, because I built the app, again, to validate you as you go through your language learning process. You can enter time like you'd enter time on a spreadsheet, or you can also put in your resources you've been using by easily just pasting in a URL. And the app will track your comprehension, the difficulty of those resources, and you can see that data as you grow in charts and pie charts and nice graphs and visuals like that. But the best thing about the app is that it takes those resources people are just entering in because they're watching things, and it actually pools those resources so everybody on the platform can see. What that does is create a centralized space for comprehensible input content for every language at your level, because again, the difficulty ratings are decided by the people watching the videos. The number one question you see on comprehensible input subreddits is always, where can I find content? I think creating a centralized space where that question can easily be answered is super important. And every time somebody enters a resource, just because they're watching the resource onto the platform, it helps out the entire community at large, until we have one place where when anybody asks, where can I find resources in X language? Lengualytics. They're just all there, and they're all rated for you. And I think that's going to be super useful for a lot of language learning communities. And of course, you can filter, sort. They get recommended by popularity. You can sort by level, creator, all the things you'd ever want to sort for and filter for that you can't really do super well on YouTube, you can do on the platform. The biggest issue I saw with apps like mine, which there aren't that many in the first place, but the ones that do exist, they seem to be not super comprehensible input focused, which I think is an issue, because I was a technical consultant for 6 years, and I'd say one of the number one things I noticed that's an issue with applications in general is they're too complicated and they try to offer too many things that most people don't want. I think most people want a well-functioning, convenient, and simple core set of really good features, which is what I was trying to offer with Lengualytics, and I think I did succeed in offering. This all ties back to the beginning of the video, because if we have a systematized way of finding centralized if we have a systematized way of finding comprehensible input content, then when your friend says, hey, I'm trying to learn a language, you don't have to just say, comprehensible input, go find your content. You can say, comprehensible input, and here's a platform to track your hours and find content at your level. Because right now, I think what's happening is people say, I want to learn a language. They download Duolingo, and they might use it obsessively for some amount of time. But it doesn't seem to work, and people come away with the conclusion, okay, you must have to be a genius to memorize a language, because they think, okay, you must have to memorize this language and consciously understand it. or they'll think to themselves, I guess only kids can learn languages. You'll see this sentiment pretty often online, where people say, well, you gotta be a kid to learn a language, or you gotta be a genius, right? And I've gotten accused of being a genius multiple times because I learned a language. And really, in my opinion, intelligence has nothing to do with language learning. In fact, in my opinion, language learning is the most you get what you put in thing I've ever done in my entire life. So when people say, oh, you're just really smart, that's how you learn Spanish. You know, obviously, it's always nice to get a compliment. I'm not saying it's not nice to be called a genius, thank you. But what I am saying is, it kind of diminishes the hard work that I put in to actually, and the discipline it took, to wake up every day and say, I'm going to do 2 to 3 hours of Spanish listening, you know? So language learning isn't easy, but I think it's really important that people know how to do it. I think people will be a lot less likely to write themselves off as bad at languages and have a more realistic understanding of what it really takes to learn a language to a high level. If you're curious about the app, please check it out. It's called Lengualytics. We're in soft launch mode. Anybody who downloads the app during the soft launch, free premium for life. I love you guys. You guys are helping me found the platform. Any of you guys that are here from Reddit, thank you for watching all the way to the end. Super appreciate you. And I've had great feedback so far, which is always good for someone who's launching a web app, because the worst feeling in the world is when you launch something and nobody seems to understand it. Everybody who uses it seems to understand it. I shouldn't say everybody, most people, most of the people who've talked to me, everybody who's talked to me seems to understand it and like it. Y al final de este video quiero mostrarles que sí hablo español con fluidez, y si quieres más videos en español, está bien, dígame en los comentarios y gracias por verme.